Welcome to the first in a series of ISCA videos. In this first tape, we will cover basic boat tuning, rigging, sail trim, crew work, and boat handling. The first section on boat tuning will take you through the tuning guide developed by George and Greg Fisher. We'll show you how to determine the proper setup for your boat, critical to achieving a balanced helm. In the second section, we'll provide an overview of the basic sail controls, with recommendations for hardware placement. We'll also discuss sail trim and crew responsibilities in both the 2- and 3-man boat. In the third section, we'll take you out on the water. We'll take you around the race course and demonstrate proper sail trim, boat handling, and crew work. We've tried to include information that will be useful to the beginner as well as the more experienced sailor. We hope you enjoy our video.
The first section of our video introduces you to the controls for sail trim and where those controls are placed on the boat. All of these controls may look confusing at first, but a well set up boat that works for you can take your attention out of the boat and let you concentrate on other important points of sailing, such as tactics, looking for wind shifts, and mark roundings.
There are any number of ways that a interlake can be rigged, of course, but I think this would be fairly standard forward the way most boats have them, and that is our jib trim comes to this block here. After it passes through what is commonly known as a barber hauler. And we have two places that the barber hauler passes through the deck so that we can position that either forward or aft. And sometimes if the wind's blowing hard enough, you might want to pull your barber haulers out maybe an inch or two going upwind. But most of the time, when we have ever used it, it's usually on a reach where we might pull it out 4 or 5 inches. But the advantage of having two places here, and it's really not as complicated to do as you'd think, you can really place that exactly where you want it on the deck so that the leech of the jib looks just right. But after it goes through the block, it goes to another block on the deck, back to a cleat, again, so it can be cleated from the weather side. Now we have our jib cloth on the jib right next to the trimming block, and again it's double-ended so it can be trimmed from either side, and I think this is something that the jib man should be working with all the time, because either if they're going to trim in the jib or ease it, very well this will follow fairly closely if there's that much change in velocity. Forward on the deck again, we have our jib halyard tension, and the way that tensions are halyard, it pulls it down, because we want at least I like to have the placement of the jib on the deck fixed, so that doesn't vary, so I know that whatever I'm doing with these blocks, it'll be constant, because that's never going to change. So this would be the jib halyard right here on the deck, and we could very well change that depending on the velocity of the wind in a race. And also we'd know exactly about where to put it again, because I have that marked with marks a lot on the line itself. On the other side is the topping lift, and again that's forward enough for the jib person to handle the topping lift height of the pole. So all these things we hope are in a position that's as easiest to get to. Again, going back to our block for our jib sheet, that's very easy, you know, with the track that we're all using now, it's very easy to adjust fore and aft, and we have that marked for what would be standard, what we'd put it forward if we'd in light air, if we want a little bit more drive in the jib, we'd put that forward and maybe put a little bit more belly to the jib down low, and the leech would be a little bit tighter up high. Or if it would really blow up, sometimes we would pull this block back about an inch from its normal position. Again, that would flatten it down low and ease it up high. Coming back further, now to adjust the location of this, our barber hauler, we have just two cleats right here that can pull that forward or aft, and it's very easy again to get to. That's very easy to put on. It seems like it looks more complicated than what it is. Now back here, next to me, now this would be my responsibility, is the Cunningham for the main, which again is just kind of hopefully goes in sync with the with the jib cloth, but it's right here on a cleat, and it's double-ended, of course, so it can be, so I can adjust it from either side, and when I go to the other side, it of course keeps that same adjustment. The cleat right after that is the traveler that I can put it back and forth depending on how far out I'd want at that particular time. But again, that would be something that I would adjust during a race. Now, I wouldn't adjust that nearly as much as I would the main sheet, but if I got into a sustained puff and I had really dumped the main and I was feathering, eventually I would, and when I say eventually, within a few seconds, I would let the traveler down a little bit and pull my main back in again so that I wasn't over pinching and I was getting my sail the power that it should have. So those are my two controls, and although you can't see it, the third control with regard to our traveler is I can raise and lower this by just a cleat down here right after the trunk. And obviously the purpose of that is if it were to blow up during the race, I could reach in and pull that down maybe an inch or two, or if I were down like that and it became light, I could ease it up. So again, so I can, what I'm always trying to do is keep the boom centered when I can get it, and when I have to let it out, I want to again be blocked as close as I could block to block so I can keep power on my leech. Now we have our boom fang right here that's adjusted by the forward person or the second person. We're just sailing, of course, with two. That would be something that I might consider bringing back here. I guess I'd like to be able to control the vang, because it just take one less thing for the forward person to worry about. Because I think it's, first of all, it's very easy to over vang an interlake with the roach that it has. So the power that you need, I don't think you need any more in this, obviously, if you're going to do it in this fashion. And if you were to bring it back here, it would be something comparable to that, because this is so easy. I could actually break the boom relatively easy if I give that really good haunts. But the vang, on the other hand, is very important to be conscious of. I think but we have to be just as careful that we don't over vang as we do vang, because what you want to do, no matter where your sail is, whether you have it completely out or just in on a reach, is again the upper batten should be parallel with the boom, and you have to be very careful on that. And if you have three people, I would assign that just specifically to one person, particularly going off wind, say not dead now but close to it, that they continually watch that, because as the wind goes up and down, obviously you want to vang as much as you can to just get that much more power, but once it eases up, you want to make sure you get the vang off, because it's just like putting brakes on to have too much vang on. Now we have straps all over the place, I guess. We have, this is a droop strap, and the same person could go from a strap that's forechip to a droop hike, just depending on what they're feeling for at the time. I think the only thing with the droop hike, and I realize a number of people like this, is it seems to me that once you're into that, you're going to be on that, hopefully be in a heavier air, and you're going to be on that tack for a while. It's not something you get in and out of. That's compared to a thwartship hiking strap. I have a fourth one back here, so when it's really blowing, I can sit pretty far aft, and I know it's not going to come up so high that's going to affect my tiller, but I think it's important, particularly for me, because it should be the easiest for me to get out. The person on the spinnaker, or even the person playing the jib, is going to have so much to do where the main's not going to be that much of a difficulty for me, and I'll be hiking out back this way. So I think it's important to have a strap back here. I have my spinnaker halyard on the port side of the trunk, and if I were to redo that, if I ever put on another halyard, I would put it on the starboard side. I think this is the way it was standard for a while, but I think I would much rather have that on the starboard side, because normally if you're taking marks to port, you'd want it on your starboard side, and then when you drop it, you'd want it on your port side. It's just a little bit unhandy to reach down like I do. I normally raise the spinnaker. I'm usually on the halyard, and again, I get used to that because a lot of times I just sail with two. I mean, two of us, counting myself, of course, but if I have three, then I let the middle person usually I'll let them take that on and off. We have a little cheating hiking arrangement here for the middle crew if they want to have it, just so, again, it can't go above deck, and I know there's some restrictions on it, but it just gives them a little something to hang on to, because the jib person always has the jib sheet, and of course I have the main sheet. But other than that, I think that's about pretty much the placement of the fittings as we have them. This is not necessary. We went to that originally with the idea we're going to be in and out on that on the tack, but we haven't done that, so that's not necessary. But obviously you need something that's dependable and strong as far as your outhaul is concerned, and so how you do it. But it's got to be, again, someplace that's convenient to get to, and this is always going to be done by the forward crew. This is where we have our jib halyard coming down on the port side of the mast. I think this is exactly where I'd want it. I want to make this as nice and strong, nice and beefy, and I think all boats coming out now have very good goosenecks. This is where my top, and it's 2 to 1, and it's just all I need. I have 2 eyes on the mast only because I'm always concerned about losing one in the middle of a race, and most people, I guess, only have one to put the pole in, but I just don't want to have to worry about that. The topping lift has a shock cord attached to the fitting, so that once the fitting's on the pole, the shock cord is putting tension on the pole to keep it down so it just won't fly up too high. And again, this is something that you have to fine-tune to finally get the right tension on that. But obviously, as the higher the pole goes, the more tension you're putting on that. But as it just to keep your pole from skying, which can be very disadvantageous if you get caught in a situation, particularly on a reach, where all of a sudden it goes up. That becomes very slow.
How far forward should your mast sit? Where should your jib leads be placed? What's the proper height for your traveler? These are important questions that need to be answered before you go on the water. The Interlake Tuning Guide, developed by George and Greg Fisher, answers these questions and gives you the measurements you need to get the most power and performance from your boat and sails. An Interlake Tuning Guide can be obtained from your fleet captain.
One of the desirable things about the Interlake is the straightforward nature of the rig. It's not difficult to get it set up properly. To check this, we need a 50 or even longer, but 50 is plenty, foot tape. We attach that to the halyard, the main halyard, and we pull it to the very top of the mast so that the shackle is snug against the top block. Now, the one thing that you do have to try to bear in mind is that some of the older style Interlakes have a block that is 2 or 3 inches higher than this new style.
Yeah, you're right.
Comparing your measurements and dimensions to those in the tuning guide. The first measurements that you will take after your mast is up and the tape is hauled all the way to the top is to make sure that the mast is vertical in the boat athwartship, that is from side to side. You would simply take the tape and find a common point, such as the top, in this case, of the guy hook, and take a measurement to that. You would then go around to the other side of the boat and take the same measurement on that side. Those numbers should be identical. The next measurement that we're curious about, and that is quite important on the Interlake, is the rake measurement. In this case, we keep the tape at the very top of the mast, and we measure to the intersection of the deck and the stern, or this edge right here. It's important that the boat be set up with the kind of rig tension, and that generally means having the jib up and set and the jib halyard pulled to the tension that you'll be using when you're sailing to take this measurement, because the amount of tension on the jib halyard naturally affects how much fore and aft the mast is pulled. As in the tuning guide, the Fisher Tuning Guide, you would like this measurement to be as close as you can come to 25.5. Again, taking into account the difference in height that your blocks at the top of the mast might affect that number. These numbers are very good starting points, and they have a dramatic effect on the way that the boat will point and can be depowered as wind strength increases. If you find that after setting everything up per the tuning guide that you're still unable to point quite as high or have as good a speed to windward, you can try changing this rake measurement 1 inch forward or backward. This would be in response to some of the other things that might be built into the boat, such as the centerboard pivot location, where if they're not identical, the rake would have to be adjusted kind of like to reflect those. In addition to the fore and aft rake, which we've just discussed, and of course making sure that the mast is vertical in the boat, the other thing we have to be sure of is where the mast is stepped, and the ideal place for this is in the maximum forward position, which is 6'4". You take a tape and you'd measure from the very point or stem to the face of the mast, which would be 6'4", and that's a pretty easy measurement to make. The next measurement that we like to have that's critical for jib trim is where the jib leads are, where the sheets are attached. The new Fisher jibs come with a, what would you want to call those, a miter line? Trim line on them. This will be a pencil line that bisects basically the clew of the jib. And what you're going to want to do is when the jib is trimmed properly, there'll be a line coming down to the corner of the sail, and if you were to extend that line right down to the deck, it will meet your track at approximately your middle air setting. And it should be approximately 8'7" from the stem of the boat to the center line of the post of the car that the block is attached to. As mentioned in the tuning guide then, in lighter air conditions where you have some kind of chop or lumpy air and you need more power, your setting would be 1 inch forward of that, and as the air would build into the 15 or 18 knot range, you might want to go back 1 inch behind that setting. The other thing that you want to check is, because there are now several different deck types, all of which do affect how your jib sheets are attached to the boat, something that you can check is the distance from center line that the tracks are. And this dimension is 40 inches, measured simply again from post to post of these cars, which of course also means that it's 20 inches from the center line. So again, if you take the dimension from the stem back 8'7", and you take a dimension perpendicular to the center line out 20 inches, that will establish the ideal location. If your deck style does not have a deck right at that spot, such as the newer deck styles of several years ago that have seats coming forward this far, you'll need to use the trim line on the jib to establish the track location. Again, the trim line on the jib should then just follow down the sheet and meet the block in a straight line.
The height of the bridle is very important for trimming the main properly, and the best all-around setting for your traveler bridle height is 24 inches to the top of the block to the top of the deck. There are some sailors who have been experimenting with and finding successful adjusting the bridle for various wind conditions, and it's very helpful in heavy winds to drop the traveler at least 5 to 6 inches down to 18 inches, or in very light winds, maybe raise it a little bit up to 27 or 28 inches. But if your bridle is fixed and you don't want to adjust it, the best all-around setting is 24 inches.
Now that you have a basic understanding of sail controls, we will explain how to adjust the main halyard, outhaul, boom vang, traveler, rig tension, jib luff tension, and other controls necessary to achieve proper sail trim.
Okay, setting the main halyard is important for proper mainsail shape as we leave the dock. Most interlakes have a series of halyard positions so that you can adjust the position of the luff from light air to heavy air. In light winds, it's best to leave it in the lower ball so that the luff actually has wrinkles all the way top to bottom. This is important because, as we know, we use this as a guide in trimming the Cunningham or setting the Cunningham while we're sailing. If we were to over trim this halyard or pull it just plain too tight and put it in the upper ball, we'd remove all these wrinkles and it would be difficult to set the draft in the right position. So instead of just using the guide of hoisting the main all the way to the top, we should use the guide of making sure that we have a little bit of wrinkle top to bottom. Here in light winds, we're going to set it on the lower ball. As we've already shown on the water, it's important to be sure your outhaul is tensioned properly to make sure that the slot is open between the main and the jib. Here is a proper setting for downwind sailing. We can see the shelf is open and the sail is fairly deep here above the window. We can also see the lower batten has a nice return in it or hook in it, which means that the sail is powerful. But upwind, this would not be the setting we'd want because, again, of the closeness of the slot that would develop because of the extra bag or extra belly in the sail. So upwind, we basically pull the sail, especially in light winds, almost out to the band. And you notice as we pull it tighter and tighter that this part of the sail actually comes up to windward and the sail becomes much flatter. Let's watch that again. Easy outhaul off, the sail gets much fuller. Good for downwind, but not good for upwind. Pulling it tighter, the sail gets much flatter and the slot will open up. And as unusual as this may seem with this crease in here, this is a proper tension for light winds, upwind, and of course upwind and heavy air, this is how tight the outhaul would be. Medium winds, we could ease it off a little bit and make the sail basically smoother as we see this here, but still we want to keep it fairly flat. Okay, there are many different styles of setting the luff tension on an interlake jib. There's a furler with a cleat attached right here at the tack. There are the Burkhardt style furler adjustments where there's actually a second halyard that pulls the cloth tension up, or as we see on this boat, which is a non-furler, there's a cloth tension that pulls it down. But in any event, you want to be able to adjust the cloth tension on your interlake jib consistently and constantly from light to heavy winds. It's an important adjustment because it actually sets the draft of the sail, which of course affects the actual performance of the sail, pointing wise versus speed. But it doesn't need to be that complicated because all we really need is a guide to be able to use to set the tension properly from light to heavy winds. And this guide is to set the luff tension so there's a slight amount of wrinkle along the luff, top to bottom. Slight meaning maybe 4 to 5 inches back from the luff tape, slight wrinkles back. If we over-tension the luff and pull it too tight, we actually pull the draft of the deepest part of the sail forward, which will affect our pointing abilities and our power capabilities. On the other hand, if we have the luff tension real loose, it'll let the draft blow back in the sail, the deepest part of the sail will move aft, and although the boat will point higher, it'll also stall the jib and create backwind in the main. So again, the all-around guide is to make sure we have a little bit of wrinkle along the luff, top to bottom, and we'll adjust this so that that's there whether it's blowing 5 or 25. There's been a tendency in the interlake class to sail with a tighter and tighter rig, and what this does is control the amount of sag in the headstay. When we talk about sag in the headstay, we talk about the amount that the jib luff will fall away from a straight line, which will create fullness in the jib. More sag means more fullness, and of course a straighter headstay means less fullness and a flatter entry. Generally, you want to keep the forestay very tight, or the jib halyard very tight, whatever you're using to tension the rig, so that the jib will stay flat and the boat can point high. Remember, this is quite a bit different from cloth tension, and these are two very independent adjustments. The cloth tension positions the draft, or the positions of fullness in the sail, while the sag actually builds in or removes fullness. So remember, we want to keep the headstay fairly tight and approximately tension the rig to 260 to 250 pounds. And this will mean that the leeward shroud will not go slack until it's blowing about 10 miles an hour while the entire crew is on the high side and hiking. Okay, trimming the main should be likened to like the gears in a car. First gear would give you acceleration, second gear would be nearly top speed, third gear would be full speed and full pointing capabilities. The relationship that we look at for trimming the main is between the top batten and the boom. And this is sighted from underneath the boom looking up at the top batten. And if we take the chord of the top batten, that is a straight line between the outboard end of the batten and the inboard end of the batten, and make that basically parallel to the boom, we have a good starting point for second and third gear. By easing the main sheet out, the top batten will ease open in relation parallel to the boom, and the boat will accelerate. By trimming it in tighter, we can bring that upper batten parallel to the boom, or even hooked if we want to in some conditions. In very, very light air like we see here, it's really difficult to get the top batten to go parallel to the boom because the weight of the boom is hooking the leech. So we have to change our guide slightly and say now the top batten parallel to the center line of the boat. To achieve this, the main sheet is eased a great deal so the boom is clear out over the corner of the transom. While this certainly won't help pointing ability, it'll help the boat accelerate and develop top speed. In really light air, we rarely are trying to point high anyway. Instead, we're trying to get the boat up to speed, and trimming the main like this is really the key. Let's start here. We'll say light air. The top batten's going to be hooked in relation to the boom just because of the way the boom hanging on it. So this is where the main sheet would be eased and the boom would be clear out over the corner of the transom. When the breeze picks up and there's enough breeze to get the boom to lift, then we'll go top batten parallel to the boom, like we see here, which is a trim we'll be in probably 80% of the time. When we need to accelerate off the starting line, out of attack, after a header, through waves, then we'll ease the sheet out so the top batten will angle outboard from parallel to the boom, and although we compromise pointing ability, we develop speed and acceleration. If for short bursts, and burst is not a good word to use, but if for short periods of time we want to really point or pinch, we can trim the main sheet in tight and actually hook the top batten in relation to the boom for 3 to 5 seconds, depending on the water. This is just for pointing, and at this, the actual left of the jib will be breaking. And then once we're through this position, or once we're through this trim that we need, we'd ease the sheet back out to first gear, top batten angle outboard from parallel to the boom for acceleration. And once we're back up to speed, parallel to the boom. And you can see that top telltale flies every once in a while, maybe 50% of the time if we're lucky. So that's not a good guide to use when we're sailing upwind. Again, the guide is setting the upper batten parallel to the boom, and that works 80% of the time except when we're trying to accelerate or we're trying to point.
In the next section, we will take you on the water and demonstrate the information on sail trim presented in the first 2 sections, as well as show boat handling tips for upwind sailing, reaching, and downwind sailing. We begin with a demonstration of sail control going upwind.
We look here, the outhaul has been eased. You can see how deep the sail is, like 2 feet up from the boom, directly above the window. Notice how hooked the lower leech is, and you can almost see a hint of backwind just about 4 feet up from the boom. Now with the outhaul tension, can you guys pull the outhaul a little bit tighter? See the sail get much flatter. You can see the crease develop along the boom, and you actually see the backwind begin to disappear. It's very important to help keep the slot open by tensioning the outhaul.
Go ahead.
The traveler is used to depower the boat in heavy winds, or maybe even more important to emphasize, balances the helm by moving the boom to leeward and still maintaining the upper batten parallel to boom position. The traveler can balance the helm and keep the boat fairly flat. It needs to be a fairly easy traveler to work, or a fairly easy system to work, because it needs to be adjusted as the puffs come and the lull is secure.
If it were blowing, say, 15 or more, that's where we'd have the traveler. And I'd probably have it a little bit lower and be trimming off that. And breeze like this, that low, and it's easily trimmed in the center, we can handle it. And what you have to go by is whether or not your crew is able to handle the power of the boat. Once in a while, perhaps you're going to have to dump your main, but if you can keep your crew hiking and not have to feather too much or dump your main too much, that would be the thing to do. Again, if it were blowing, you let your traveler off and you put some vang on so that when you did ease it out, it would be just like a door going out. There would be very little of the rise in the boom. You'd be letting the wind off just like as if you had a door there, back and forth. But then again, this is something that's not stationary, particularly on inland lakes. As soon as you would get a change in velocity, you got to keep in mind to try to get that traveler back to weather again and make sure that you're not vanging when you shouldn't be, because you're constantly going to be watching the upper batten to make sure that it's parallel to the boom. And it's not until you get so overpowered that you have to dump the traveler and start easing out your main that you put a lot of vang on. With the Cunningham, what you're trying to do is make sure as well as you can that you're putting the pocket in the sail where the sailmaker intended it to be. And if you have the Cunningham on too tight, although the sail might look pretty because it's very smooth, what you've done, right, like what I've done there, is pull the pocket too far forward. So what I'll do is ease that off to where I just get a hint of wrinkles maybe halfway up the mast. Now on the other hand, you can't overdo that, and there's no reason to have wrinkles all the way up your spar, because then you'd have a tendency maybe to put the pocket too far aft. So there's just maybe halfway up the mast, just this hint of wrinkles so that you know that it's relaxed. Let's take a tack here, ready?
So far, we've concentrated on sail trim, but good boat handling skills are just as important. Balancing crew weight and roll tacking are two effective ways to improve boat speed. George Fisher and his crew graphically illustrate how to maintain boat speed by proper roll tacking.
Now the idea behind a roll tack is not to slam the boat around or use a lot of gymnastics or athletics. It's just simply to allow the boat to roll all by itself. See here, they're using their weight, their crew weight, to help turn the boat. Very slow, very gentle. Excellent. Now let's zoom in on the skipper here and watch his actions. Notice again how he's holding the hiking stick. He's got his main sheet in his hand at all times. He maintains that tiller hiking stick position as he steers the boat up into the wind. He faces forward through the entire tack. Notice how he changes the hiking stick behind his back. The main sheet always looks forward, never turns aft. This is very important, so you know exactly where you are at all times. Let's watch it one more time, because I think this is very important in the tack. It's very smooth, and a lot of it is the rate of the turn that the skipper uses as through the tack, and how he puts the boat on the wind after the tack. Can you do another one, Dad? Okay, this part of the tack, very slow, very slow. Only once the boat's almost headwind right there, the rate of the turn speeds up, faces forward, changes behind his back, and sits down, and the boat comes back up to vertical. Excellent. Notice when the boat has heel, how it develops weather helm. You can see the tiller is off center a good 5 or 8 degrees. You can see the rudder actually dragging through the water. If the boat were sailed flatter, hey Dad, I was gonna say, can you sail the boat dead flat for a minute and watch what happens to the helm? Now with the boat nearly flat, you can see the helm is completely neutral. There's no bubbles off the rudder, and very little helm. Although this looks odd that the boat sailed this flat because we're not used to it, the boat would truly be sailing much faster through the water.
Now let him have it heel.
Can you heel it again a little bit? Now look at the helm load up again, and look at the gurgles off the rudder showing the drag of the rudder going through the water. This is perfect. Watch a skipper as he sails through this next tack. We'll notice how he faces forward, again slowly heads the boat up into the wind, and changes the hiking stick behind his back only after the boat comes through the tack. It's important too to notice how much he eases the main sheet out in the middle of the tack. Slowly he heads the boat up, faces forward, there the main sheet's eased, changes behind his back, sits down, and only after the boat is flat and trim, there he's trimmed the main back into its proper upper batten parallel to the boom position.
That was good.
Notice how he's holding the hiking stick and the main sheet's in his hand, and if you look closely you can even see the main is not cleated. Boat is flat, very little helm. That boat's going very fast. You can feel when you watch these tacks that the boat is turning very smoothly with very fluid motions, and you can really truly see the boat is not losing speed through the tack. Remember, it's not legal to accelerate out of the tacks, but it's perfectly legal to maintain your speed, which of course is the goal here. Now watching the middle crew, notice how he is the balance man. He's going to help the boat heel over to windward before the tack. He's with the skipper. He's going to help flatten the boat out after the tack and then move in to maintain the proper balance. Notice too how he's ready to hike. He's got his foot in the hiking strap, prepared for the puffs. You can also see him look forward, and if we could hear the conversation, surely he's calling the puffs so the skipper can anticipate them. Notice the jib man is sitting down on the floor watching the trim of the jib at all times. Man, this tack's perfect. Now if we watch the jib man, notice first how carefully he's continually watching the trim of the jib. The middle person here is calling the puffs, probably watching the compass if we're in the middle of a race. There you can see he anticipated the puff and the boat barely heeled in that one. Now the jib person, if we watch closely, will let the jib back for just a second in the middle of the tack, or more precisely probably 2 seconds. So just as it hits the mast, he holds it and lets it off after it has been against the mast for 2 seconds. Obviously here the breeze is pretty shifty and puffy today. And if you watch closely, although the skipper has to move his helm to keep the boat steering straight and at the right angle of the wind, there's very little jiggling of the tiller. And again, as we mentioned earlier, that's very important to maintain top speed. The less you use the rudder, the more you balance the boat, as we see here, through weight, the faster it'll go through the water. In this puff, if we had watched closely, we would have seen the jib person trim the jib end a little bit tighter. And again, his guide would have been the middle batten, straight back parallel with the center line of the boat. The boat's very flat here, flat wake, very little helm. As they move into attack, watch the jib as it backs against the mast. 1001, 1002. After the tack, the jib has just now been trimmed in to its proper middle batten straight back position. Like the main, the jib needs to remain eased after the tack to keep the boat up to speed, or allow the boat to accelerate up to top speed.
I'm on the upper batten right now.
On the main?
Yeah. Got a telltale going straight back.
Okay. In this kind of breeze, with the main trimmed properly, we can see the telltale is flowing probably 50% of the time. The telltale really, although is a guide often used by many sailors, we feel is a little bit misleading, because when the sail is trimmed so that the telltale is always flowing, oftentimes it's under trimmed. We can see here it's stalled much of the time. Top batten, parallel to the boom, is truly the guide to use. This tack will show how valuable the roll tack is, because the boat just stays flat in this instance. You can see how the boat's slowed down. There's no movement. You can see how the boat's very slow. Watch that again. No roll tack. You can feel the boat slowing down in the middle of the tack. You can actually see by the wake once it comes out how slow the boat is going now at this time. The big difference is how long the sails are actually luffing when the boat is head to wind. The roll tack, the sails fill from side to side almost instantaneously. Here, the sails luff for 1001, 1002, 1003, like 3 seconds the sails are luffing, which of course is drag and slows the boat down. So the point is, in the middle of a tack, make it as quickly as you can to get the sails filled from side to side and get the boat back up to speed. How about a roll tack now? you notice there, the main left for maybe a second, while the jib left for barely 2 seconds. It really makes a difference to get it filled from side to side with a minimum amount of luffing.
The reaching leg can provide some of the biggest thrills in sailing. To help you achieve those thrills, our skipper and crew demonstrate sail trim, boat handling skills, and crew responsibilities on the reach. We begin with sail trim.
Okay, we've now bore off onto a starboard tack reach. It's fairly close. If we're too close to carry the chute, or if we're just beginning and trying to learn the best way to sail without messing with the spinnaker, the things that we would first concentrate on are getting the sails basically trimmed properly, and that's getting them out and of course just on the verge of luffing. In the case of the mainsail, the main sheet's no longer pulling down on the outer end of the boom, so we have to use a vang now to apply tension on the leech. That's again to keep that top batten basically parallel to the boom. In the boat, Steve's got the centerboard up to probably half down instead of full down as we would be going upwind. On the jib, we trim out. We do have the barber haulers out slightly, and this functions somewhat similar to the boom vang in that, as we can see, the downward pull of the sheet has been moved outboard to keep tension along the outside leech, to keep that slot slightly open and to keep the sail from twisting off too much. We could back off a little bit on the probably a higher tension ever so slightly if we wanted to add a little bit of fullness to the sail, which would be similar to backing off ever so slightly on the outhaul if we thought that was appropriate in these wind conditions. Again, this is to make the sails rounder and more powerful, to make the boat go faster, since we're not hiking to keep the boat level, and we can afford to have additional power. These slide adjustments that we've talked about, Cunningham's, higher tension, and barber haulers, are really the last things that should be of your concern. Your main attention should be on keeping the sheets adjusted properly and keeping a close eye on that boom vang. The biggest problem probably on the finer tuning is forgetting to get them set back for going upwind once we get to the mark. Marks being positions where boats come together, and we can of course get into some tight tactical situations, and it's easy to forget. So once you start making these adjustments, make sure you have the lines marked or have a good idea of where they belong to go back upwind.
Flying the spinnaker can be the most intimidating part of sailing. Spinnaker handling poses challenges to even the most advanced skippers. The key to proper spinnaker handling is practice. Practice with your crew until everyone feels comfortable raising, flying, and lowering the chute. We begin our section on spinnaker showing 2 ways to launch the chute: the preferred method, to leeward, and the alternate method, to windward.
Okay, let's assume we're going to a weather mark, and the forward crew is going to put up the pole, and I will raise it with the halyard the way we have it back. It comes back to me, and the middle crew will help the spinnaker get out of the boat. So here we go. You can drop the jib anytime. You have to let off now. Many times when you put up the spinnaker like this, it's up to the skipper to keep the weight of the boat proper, so he'll be moving all around the place so that you're not heeling too much to the weather, too much to the leeward.
We're going to attempt to a windward launch here. The key things is, if you have a third crew, is for them to pull on what will be the sheet to get the sail around the front of the boat and to coordinate the toss.
Go ahead. As they prepare for a windward toss, you can see Marion has the entire spinnaker in his arms ready. He throws the spinnaker forward, the skipper hoists, and Steve does a great job of pulling the sheet around, trimming the guys so the spinnaker is clear and actually almost flying. That's an excellent job, because that is a tough maneuver to get the spinnaker out and away from the boat.
Flying the spinnaker requires total concentration from both the skipper and crew. The crew maintains proper sail trim, constantly adjusting the pole, spinnaker sheet, and guy. The skipper must concentrate on tactics while keeping the sails full and driving. The next section will provide a few tips and guidelines for maintaining proper sail trim and good boat speed.
Okay, notice on this reach how the spinnaker's set with the two ends parallel, the two clews parallel to the water. Now, as you can see here, it's kind of difficult to see the leeward clew, so we have another guide we use, which is setting the center seam of the spinnaker parallel to the mast. And from here we can see that the center seam going from the head to the middle of the foot, right through the middle of the numbers, is exactly parallel to the mast. That's showing that the two ends are parallel and the pole position is proper. We're not worried so much about whether the pole is perpendicular to the mast or it's level to the horizon or anything. All we're concerned about is the position of the two clews or that center seam. Notice here how Marion's doing a great job keeping the spinnaker left curled. You can see a nice 6 to 8 inch curl, showing that he's constantly trying to ease it out to get that curl in there. That's a good guide to knowing that you don't have it over trimmed. If the spinnaker's over trimmed, it'll backwind the main, just as the jib does when you're sailing close hauled upwind. You can see how the head of the spinnaker is off the top of the mast a little bit, maybe 5 or 6 inches. This is helpful to keep the slot open between the top of the spinnaker and that area of the main. There's a slot problem up there, just like on the main and the jib, and we got to try to keep that open. So easing the halyard off will help. Notice here, as my dad mentioned earlier, the outhaul isn't that critical. They have not bothered to ease it off, so it just isn't that big of a concern. You can see if you look at the telltale off the top batten on the main that it's flowing straight off the leech. That's showing proper boom vang tension. If the vang were too tight, that telltale would stall. If they were too loose, it would stall. And ideally, what we're looking for with vang tension is that top batten being set parallel to the boom. If you look at the left of the main, you see wrinkles all the way top to bottom pretty much. And that's good. That's what we want to be sure to see when we ease the Cunningham off, so that the draft moves back away from the mast and the main shape sets up properly. The vang needs to be constantly played, just as the left of the spinnaker and just as the main sheet, to keep that top batten proper. As the breeze changes, the vang needs to change. Now, if we see the pole set improperly, let's lower the pole. Matt, can you lower the pole a little bit too much? Down, pole down. More. Okay. Now we can see the center seam is no longer parallel to the mast, and you can see how the luff looks very tight. You can see that the draft in the spinnaker has moved forward, and now this is a very inefficient shape, and that it would be very difficult to reach with this spinnaker as it's set right now. If we go the other way, Matt, can you raise it up real high now? Even a little bit higher. If we exaggerate it and go a little bit higher yet, and obviously the center seam is no longer parallel to the mast, you can see how the top of the spinnaker now breaks before the bottom, and the top looks very, very full. You can almost see a crease developing in the middle of the spinnaker. And again, if we were trying to close reach with this shape, it would not be very effective. Remember the guide of setting the two clews parallel, or if you can't see the leeward clew, which is so often the case for the crew when they're sitting in the boat, use the center seam parallel to the mast. Go ahead and lower it again so it's proper, okay? One thing we haven't touched on here is the position of the pole relative to the wind, and this really isn't a big concern in that the pole should basically be perpendicular to the wind. On my dad's boat right here, there's not a telltale on the topping lift. Usually he has one just about a foot up from the pole. There'd be a piece of yarn which would make it very easy for Marion flying the chute to keep the pole positioned properly. Notice here with 3 people in the boat that the middle crew, or the forward crew here, who's not flying the chute, can look around. He's balancing the boat. He can look aft and see wind and puffs and calm. Notice too how my father is sitting on the high side to balance the boat. Notice how flat the boat is. There you can see the crew looking for wind. Notice too how my father's holding the hiking stick forward to help minimize the oversteering that we had talked about. Everything looks good here. Obviously on this boat, we are not using a furler and the jib is dropped. And on a boat with the furler, of course, the jib would be furled up and out of the way. This is excellent trim here, and Marion's doing a great job of flying the chute. This is a good shot showing perfect boom vang tension. You can see the top batten is just about parallel to the boom. You can see the telltale flowing cleanly off the leech. If the vang were a little bit too tight, Marion, can you overdo the vang once? Pull it on too tight and then real loose. With the vang real tight like we see here, the top batten is hooked. And this will stall the sail. And you can see the telltale there dropping behind the main every so often. If it were, there's a good shot showing it stalled. And if we're under vang, as we see here, we lose valuable power. So again, what we're looking for is the upper batten parallel to the boom. This is a good shot showing too the parallel clues on the spinnaker. You can almost picture the pole height acting as a Cunningham to the main. Lower the pole, it pulls the draft forward. Raise the pole, it lets the draft blow too far aft. By keeping the two ends even in the pole position so that the center seam is parallel to the mast, as we discussed earlier. Here too, the curl on the left, which is so important for keeping that slot between the main and the spinnaker open. Here you can see the slot very well, and if the spinnaker were over trimmed. Hey Steve, could you over trim the spinnaker for a second? Like we see here, you can actually feel the boat slow down, and you can see that the slot now is much narrower, and up top by the interlake insignia is nearly closed. Okay, can you ease it back out? Notice again how flat the boat is sailed with the crew weight fairly well centered. See how flat the wake is off the transom, showing perfect fore and aft trim.
When sailing downwind, boat balance becomes even more important. Greg Fisher explains how to minimize tiller movement by maintaining proper boat balance downwind.
Lateral balance is real important in helping the boat steer. By heeling the boat to leeward, as we see here, the boat heads up. And by heeling the boat to windward, the boat bears off. This is a real good tool to use at times so you don't have to use the rudder. Remember, whenever you steer with the rudder, you're actually using a brake. When sailing on a long, light air, close reach, if you need to head up, just moving your weight slightly to leeward will help the boat steer up into the wind, and of course heeling it to windward will help it bear off. Once again, notice how the crew is positioned so that the skipper can sit on the high side and see the puffs, see the spinnaker, and see the trim of the main. Here's perfect helm balance so that you can let go of the tiller and the boat will literally sail itself. It's a little bit lee helm there, which means it's a little bit heeled. There you go. There you can see perfect balance. And again, you can see how flat the wake is leaving the transom. Because of the importance of helm balance, dead downwind, it's often very valuable to heel the boat slightly to weather, as we see here. The guide as to how far to heel to weather, of course, again, is the feel on the tiller. If the helm were let go of here, the boat would steer itself, and of course a neutral helm means no drag on the rudder and the fastest possible speed through the water. This also gives more projected area as you heel the boat to weather in the spinnaker, because it allows the spinnaker to fly out from behind the main. This shows real good trim and real good balance here. Notice too that the pole has been set so that the two clews are just about even, and again you can see the curl on the left of the spinnaker. Be careful though of sailing dead downwind in very light winds when heading it up just a little bit, or often called heating it up, can give greater speed through the water and a faster track to the mark. As we see here, now the boat's headed up a little bit and the speed will increase. In medium air, oftentimes it's very fast to sail the boat dead downwind and heel to weather. Medium being 8 to 10 miles an hour, as we see right here.
Now a demonstration of what can be every sailor's nightmare, the spinnaker jibe. When practiced and performed properly, however, it can become a routine sailing skill. This video helps you make the transition from nightmare to routine by showing each step from different angles, each angle illustrating the crew and skipper's responsibilities.
Notice here how the skippers balance the boat as the crew moves in. And to roll the boat through the jibe, the skipper moves to leeward. So often we get very concerned about keeping the spinnaker perfectly filled through the jibes. While that's always nice, the most important thing is to keep the speed up and maintain our tactical position as we go into mark roundings. Sometimes sailing really wide and giving the crew plenty of time to keep the chute filled can waste valuable distance and allow other boats to get inside us at mark roundings.
Ready? Now let's go. Real nice dive. Here we go.
You're in. Move high. That is better. We did a different jibe that time. In this case, the pole was disconnected from both the mast and the sheet and allowed to dangle while the boom was jibed. The pole then is hanging pretty much right in front of the crew on the new windward side, ready to be hooked into the sheet. And since it's not under load, it was rather easy to do. And it seemed to make for a smoother jibe. Seems to be that's kind of the new type of jibe. It's preferred in heavy air. It keeps the crew throughout. They're not having to go deep to one side or the other. And there is the advantage of developing a system for jibing that's used consistently so that it becomes second nature. That can be used in heavy air, moderate air, or light air.
Less risk of tangles and jams and so on.
And it doesn't seem to be as much risk of tangling or jamming. Yeah.
Ready?
I'm ready. We'll try another one, see if we can do a little better. I'm off. Coming across. I'm on the wrong side of the boat. You're made. If we were sailing at this time, it would be my job, since I'm not flying spinnaker, to be looked on my helmsman's blind shoulder, and also slightly off the weather quarter. I'd be looking for puffs and for boats and how close the competitors are getting. This frees the spinnaker trimmer to concentrate on the chute and the helmsman to steer its course. Okay, trim back on your guy as we turn. Okay. I'm behind it there, sorry. Okay. Coming across. You're made. Whoever the person is, whether you're a 3 crew or 2 crew, if they're trimming the spinnaker in the case of a 3 crew boat, they should always be allowed to be on the windward side. It gives them a better view of the chute. Therefore, unlike upwind, the helmsman and the remaining crew will move in the boat to compensate for the proper heel.
As with the spinnaker launch, the spinnaker can be taken down to windward or to leeward. The preferred method, to windward, is demonstrated.
Going into the drop. Okay, do you guys want to move into drop and the chute? Going through all the steps? It's going to be important as a forward crew comes off the leeward side to balance the boat, that the crew works to keep the boat flat, as we see here. The jib will go up. Notice how my father stands up and moves to leeward. The jib goes up. Notice that the sheet is uncleated, so it's not over trimmed. You can see the jib, if anything, is sloughing a little bit so that it doesn't choke the slot. Pole comes off. The crew pulls it down to weather. My father stays to leeward to balance the boat. Halyard comes down. Good teamwork here. Notice how the skipper is balancing the boat. Okay, notice how my father's pulling the main sheet in as we had discussed. Good crew work. Notice how the forward crew is keeping his eye on the jib and not worrying about the spinnaker. Marion in the middle does all the work on the spinnaker. That's excellent, excellent crew work there. Okay, this is good shot showing perfect sail trim here. We've talked about the upper batten being parallel to the boom, and you can see that position is reached right here. The Traveler is up high enough that the two blocks at the back are almost touching. That's very important, as we mentioned earlier, to keep the boom close to center line. See, the Cunningham is set so there's a little bit of wrinkle on the left of the main, which again is important for setting the draft properly.
Perhaps you've recognized the instructors in our video: George Fisher, Greg Fisher, and Marion Zog. George is an Interlake national champion and longtime Interlake sailor. Greg is a Premier 1 design sailor and sailmaker. Marion is a dedicated and accomplished Interlake sailor active in the Interlake class. Let's listen as they give their thoughts on sailing.
We've talked about a lot of things today with this video. We've talked about a lot of details about making the boat go fast. We've shown you a lot of little items that can make you go just that little bit faster. And we've shown you some really basic things too that are important to a race-winning effort. But we can't forget, really the key thing is to be able to make the boat go fast around the race course. You've got to steer it well and you've got to have good boat handling. And there's really no other substitute for that other than practice. No matter how tight you tweak your jib cloth or how tight you pull your outhaul, or if your rake is a ½ an inch off, no matter where you are there, you've got to put it in the right place and make it go fast. Speed is really, really important, because without speed your tactics won't come together. But as far as good boat handling and steering, I honestly believe account for a good 90% of it. You've got to have that together before you have to worry about your hull and your sails and your tuning. They're important, but those other things, the steering and the boat handling, are key.
Sailing's a neat sport, and particularly sailing interlake is really a neat pastime. But fortunately, sailing's a jealous sport too, and it takes some sort of commitment if you really want to be successful in it, and it takes practice. And when we talk about boat handling, boat steering, crewing, these things, it's not done just the way we're doing it today, and that's put it on a video. You still have to go out and do it. And you also have to make your mind up, no matter where you are in your sailing career, you can always improve. There's always going to be better ways to do things, and you can improve yourself. No matter where you are, is once you admit that that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to try to figure out where my weakest point is, and I'm going to work on it. If it's steering upwind, if it's going downwind, if I don't think my crew and I are quite together, you've got to recognize that and go out and work on it. And it's a great sport. We all have such a great time doing it, and in the interlake class you have so many neat people in it, and I think it's probably the best group of people you could be with that will share anything that they know about an interlake or how to sail it. So all I say is let's go to it and do the best we can, and good luck in your sailing next year.
I am flattered to be given the opportunity to offer anything, and my skills, of course, pale when certainly standing between the world-class helmsmen like George and Greg Fisher. Perhaps the perspective I can bring is a more recent memory of being with many of you who are looking at this video in the middle of the fleet and at the back of the fleet. And if there's anything I've learned that has helped me move forward, and it's just the kinds of things that the other side of the coin to everything that's been talked about today. And if there's anything that you kind of get from the video is the level of observation that you have to increase. You have to develop an eye for a sail shape. You have to develop an eye for how the boat's sitting in the water. And one of the best things you could probably do is after you get some of these rules of thumb that you've heard about and get the boat set up right and find yourself moving well next to other boats that are normally leading the fleet, is to develop a sense of how that boat's moving through the water and remember it. Because at some point you need to develop that feel for when the boat's moving well and move a little bit away from these visual clues that you actually have to constantly be looking at. Because at that point, once your speed gets up to par with the people in the front of the fleet and you can keep the boat there without your total concentration, the game really begins as you begin to try to track the wind and track the shifts and play with tactics. So your main priorities at first when you're just beginning is to get in the boat, get time in the boat, and begin to develop that feel for when it's going well and getting these basic rules of thumb down pat so that you can move up more quickly.
Not home. And if the wind is right, you can sail away and find serenity. Oh.